Yeah, this is the Bandolero Pinches representing for the Supreme Vibes Radio with the one and only DJ Kurt. Whenever you want to listen to culture, roots, R&B music, just lock your dial to Supreme Vibes Radio, the radio in Florida that play music without exception.
Stephanie.
Hello, Charlene. Thank you so much for this honor. I do look forward to being as real, raw, and relatable to the listeners with the goal of connecting to those who need help, hope, and healing from narcissistic abuse by sharing my own personal experience.
Thank you so very much. Now, Stephanie, narcissistic abuse, it began somewhere. Let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your journey. What was it like growing up as a child?
Well, Charlene, I was born in the parish of St. Thomas on a beautiful little island called Sweet, Sweet Jamaica. I was a little country girl who liked climbing trees, playing with her dolls, and watching JBC. Yes.
JBC. I remember JBC.
Yes, our only local television station at the time. Mm-hmm. I also did very well in school. Before I knew what was going on, I was a daddy's girl. Everything seemed okay through my childish eyes until I was about 8 or 9 years old, when it was very evident something wasn't right with my parents. I grew up in a physically and verbally abusive home. My father was an extreme narcissist. At that age, I never even knew what that was, nor would I find out until many, many years later.
Right.
You could cut fear with a knife to how thick it was in my house. Me and my brother, who is 4 years my senior, had to witness hundreds of times when my father would use his words to obliterate any self-worth or self-esteem my mother had.
Wow.
His words were fatal and derogative. His intent was to dominate, punish, and ensure that we all knew who the boss was.
Wow.
He would speak harshly to us at times. I was so afraid of him. After every argument with my mom, he would sharpen his army knife. Boy, that was a scary sight.
Oh, wow.
I remember one morning my brother and I watched him hit our mom, and we thought that was it. We thought he was going to kill her that morning. My mother wasn't allowed to get a job. She couldn't even walk around the community or go to her gate without being accused of seeing another man. I used to watch her cry. She hardly had any friends. But the year she spent with my father, her life just wasted away. That's the environment I grew up in, and it remained pretty much the same until we escaped it.
Wow. How that must have been a trauma for both you and your brother at that time, witnessing that happening to your mother, you know, in a place where you all should be calling home, should be protected by a mom and dad, and, you know, the abuser is your father. Wow. But you said you escaped. How did you escape the horror of that environment?
Well, on March 7, 1995, I remember so clearly, which happened to be my father's birthday, and 8 days before my 12th birthday, the Great Depression, as I call it, took place in my childhood home. My father came home drunk, decided he was going to kill my mom, my brother, me, and himself. The devil is a liar. Glory to Jesus Christ. He didn't get his way, and we escaped by fleeing to our neighbor's house. After that, my life shifted and was never the same again.
So you said you escaped to your neighbor's house, meaning that he tried?
No, we ran away from him, and we stayed by the neighbor's house, so he couldn't get to us.
Oh, wow. So what happened next, Stephanie?
This whole experience traumatized me as a little girl, Charlene. My family separated after that. My mom ran away, literally ran away, and took me with her. My brother stayed with our grandmother, and my father just went on to find another woman. Oh,
another woman in the same community. Did you know this woman? Is it somebody that the family knew before?
No, actually, we went to another parish, so I didn't know what was going on. So eventually I found out about this other woman, and she got pregnant, and life goes on.
All right. So Stephanie, at that tender age, going through all that trauma, seeing your father being abusive to your mother, going through the threats from your father as it relates to your life and your brother's life as well. What was life like for you leading up to adulthood?
Rough, tough and painful.
Wow.
My father stopped supporting me, and my mom, who now had to seek employment, could hardly provide for both of us. Between ages 8, 11, and 18, I had already moved 6 times in my life.
6
We moved,
times.
yes, 6
Wow.
times.
Wow.
We moved to another parish, hence I had to get a transfer to another high school where I started well, but ended up failing most of my CXC subjects because by this time I had withdrawn to myself. I found it hard to make friends, but I managed to have a few, had low self-esteem, was suffering lack and insufficiencies. I suffered many hungry days. I was
Wow.
very skinny and I started to break down, and I just basically gave up on everything. I had no mentorship nor support. My mother was a broken woman at the time, so I couldn't even turn to her, and I needed a friend to open up to. It was around this time I met this guy who literally stole my heart. I was just 15 years old.
Stole your heart, Stephanie.
We
Okay.
started a relationship and quickly bonded with each other. He was also a very broken young man, 2 years older than I was, and he became everything I needed in that time of my life, or so I thought. He became my best friend. He was my best friend. He took the time to excavate my soul, Charlene.
Wow.
One conversation at a time. Yes, it was deep. It was that deep connection that we had. He knew I was a broken teen girl, and also how much I began to care for and love him.
Okay.
All right. So around
So
this
during
time,
that time, you were loving this new person, as you call him, the love of your life, the one who stole
yes,
your heart,
yes.
even though you were broken.
Even though I was broken, I found this deep connection with this person, and I held on to it with dear life.
Okay. Okay. What's happened next?
Right. I had accepted Jesus Christ around this time as well, but I backslided. This guy, a little about him, he fell out of high school, always on the streets. He smoked weed. He never stayed home. I guess his house was not the kind of home he wanted to be in, arguments, stuff like that. As I said, he was a broken young man. I knew he was messed up, but because he gave me the attention I hungered for, I stayed with him. There were people who tried to warn me about him, but I ignored them. All his friends were like sexually active, but I wasn't. Okay. And I feared that he would leave me or cheat on me because I wouldn't give in to his persistent charm and intimate encounters.
Wow.
I didn't trust him because he was always around those kinds of friends, and by the time I gave in to his seductions, he only came around when he wanted to have his way with me, after which he would just leave. Irrespective of, I still stayed with him.
Really, Stephanie, wasn't this an empty feeling? Wasn't this an empty feeling for you?
It was so much an empty feeling, I felt used, but as I said, I had bonded so much with him and I had a lot of fear inside of me. So I held on to him. But hear this, Charlene, I had settled. At such a young age, I thought nobody would love me with all my mess. I had trauma bonded with this young man because of brokenness, lost identities, and lack of knowledge. I self-sabotaged myself by staying in a relationship because of fear, shame, and I had convinced myself I was in love with him and will do right by him like a good woman should, despite the red flags.
Despite the red flags.
Right. No, by 17 years old, I was pregnant.
Wow.
Due to his inability to father and support the child, I had to abort the pregnancy.
Oh, wow.
This crushed my soul, Charlene. I cried for days, and he never even comforted me. I remember him looking at me crying in bed, but he never said a word to me.
Oh, wow.
By 18, I was pregnant again. He asked me if I was going to keep it, and I said yes. By 19, I was a mother. 5 months later, I was pregnant again.
Wow. So 5 months after giving birth to your first child, you became pregnant again.
Right.
Oh.
Actually, after you have baby, you wait 6 months and then you go back
Yes,
to the
and then you go
doctor.
back, but this is five
Sorry, not
months.
months, 6 weeks. Sorry, 6 weeks.
Yes, and this is
Yes.
5 months later, a pregnancy again.
Yeah, because I was so insecure. I was a very insecure young woman because at
Mm-hmm.
4 weeks he came to visit and he wanted to have his way with me,
4 weeks after giving birth.
and I got stitches. Yes, I had
Oh,
stitches.
wow.
And he wanted to have his way, and because of the deep fear that I had, so much fear and insecurities in me, I gave myself over to him. But I remember crying about it, and it was like he didn't care.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
he didn't want the baby. He said he
This is the
couldn't afford
second
it.
one.
Yeah, the 5 months later pregnancy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I had to abort that one. This one almost sent me to my grave because I had to watch them do the abortion, unlike the first time when they put me to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It was very traumatizing for me. It
Oh.
affected me for years after.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he never comforted me. As time went by, I got a job in corporate Jamaica, and by age 23, I married him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even have a job. By this time, I had recommitted my life to Christ and hated the fact that I wasn't married, and he wanted to have his way with me nonetheless. So I bought the
Mm-hmm.
ring, his and mine, bought the outfits, made the arrangements, and we got married. But little did I know, Charlene, that was the beginning of horrors.
Oh, wow, Stephanie. So at this time, you're saying that you were the one who got married to this man. You married this man, the
Yes,
love
Charlene,
of your life.
love of my life.
2 abortions, one
Right.
child, a man that showed no empathy for you. Now, at this point, what are some of the challenges that you're going through? At this point, 23, you got married to this man. As a matter of fact, you married the man. What now?
Right.
Share with our listeners from there, please.
Sure. Yes, Charlene, thank you again for having me. It's
Mm-hmm.
not so easy to put 21 years in one interview, but for the sake of time and our listeners, I'll do my best. When I tell my story, I'm intentional about being real about it, raw, so that those who are experiencing similar abuse unknowingly, as I went through, can identify, relate, and get the help, hope, and healing that they
Mm-hmm.
need. All
Mm-hmm.
right. For the first few years, I felt like he tried to do the best he could.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't all pain and sorrow. He has a wonderful personality,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think it was his kindness toward me at times that really kept me holding on, because
Mm-hmm.
I never really had that love connection, that relationship with my mom, nor did I have it with anyone else. I was separated from my brother. So I really held on to that relationship. He
Right.
he he had no problem with me, paying his school fee to get a skill and doing resumes for him to get a good job, which he did. So I
Mm-hmm.
got him the gears he would need to work. I loved taking care of him only because, I loved him. He
Mm-hmm.
had no one else to do it for him.
But
As
you.
the year, right, but me. I was working at the time and I could afford to do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to be that friend to him, that support.
Mm-hmm.
As the years went by, I grew even more frustrated because no matter how hard I tried to communicate with him, he was always very distant emotionally and
Mm-hmm.
would hardly respond when I spoke to him. His silent treatment was so cruel and disrespectful, and it only made me start to develop
Resentment for
resentment
him.
and right and bitterness towards him.
Mm-hmm.
Believe
Mm-hmm.
it or not, believe it or not, during our relationship, there was a time when he got baptized. One,
Wow.
yeah,
And,
one
and
month.
and what did that have to do with you influencing him?
I think it had a lot to do with
Okay.
me, right? 1 month after I got baptized, actually, he got baptized. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, Charlene, wow, finally. My
Yes.
God, I've waited
Yes.
so long for this moment.
Right.
Our lives are going to change forever. And I finally have the husband I dreamed of. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sadly, his spirituality didn't last. You know, the very year I got baptized, I began to believe God for miracles for me, my young family. After much praying, fasting, sowing sacrificial seeds and believing God, we got our breakthrough the following year. So, at this time, now we're on top of
Top
the
of the
world. Yeah, because God came through for
You're
us.
on top
And,
of things. He's
no,
married. He is
right,
baptized.
right.
Things are coming through because you're now both, having this bond with God and your young
Yes,
family. You're reaping the fruits from your seed, so to
hard
speak.
labor. Right.
Hmm.
Yes. So by now, this breakthrough, he had to migrate. So
Hmm.
he migrated to a small island where he got a new job with a really good salary. I
Hmm.
had gotten pregnant with our second child
Hmm.
and had the baby 1 week before he migrated.
Hmm.
It was it was 1.5 years until it wasn't until 1.5 years before me and the kids joined him overseas.
Hmm.
No, during that time away from his family, he completely backslided and slept with numerous women. He confessed this to me, Charlene. All right,
Hmm.
not making it up. He confessed it to me. He was having the time of his life. No, he's all by himself in a foreign country. He's making tons of money, and he can do
And the
what he wants.
women are flogging him
And it's
and
the beautiful Caribbean women were like KFC,
right.
leg breast and fry, and he could resist. I can laugh now, Charlene.
Yes,
I'm telling you, I
yes.
can laugh now. But then,
It was
I,
painful.
when I found out, Charlene, it completely devastated me. Everything changed. My life
Hmm.
shattered. I
Hmm.
mean, a wife finding this out. I mean, I thought we were headed in the right direction, but obviously there was no transformation of heart because here I am on the floor in tears, crying my heart out. My husband just broke our wedding vows and it changed my
Hmm.
life. It was never the same again. It hurt me
Hmm.
so much because I thought he had changed. But little by little, he began to change for the worse. And I began to get more bitter and resentful toward him for being extremely unreliable, emotionally distant, neglectful, only seemed to be interested in me when he wanted sex or needed me to do something for him. There was
Hmm.
never any intimacy. He never made anything special. He never had a vision, and that frustrated me. All that seemed to matter was his life away from home. I would,
Hmm.
you know, um, my way of dealing with this was to use my words to cut at him because that's all I could do to get his attention. But
Hmm.
Charlene, that only made things worse.
And when you say use your words to cut at him, you mean argue with him. You mean saying things that you know he would not like.
Yeah,
Hmm.
things he would not like. Um, in 2015, I almost had a nervous breakdown. There was just no way of connecting to my husband. Everything that could go wrong seemed to be going wrong.
Hmm. Hmm.
2016, I got pregnant again,
And it's now is your third child
my third child. Yes. I felt a bit down this time about getting pregnant for my husband because I knew deep down inside he wouldn't take care of me, but I still hoped he would.
Hmm.
It was the same time he bought his car.
Hmm.
You know, I had to be on bed rest because I was bleeding in my womb in the first trimester, and I was in severe pain and had every kind of symptom. I thought I was going to die in that pregnancy. Man, it was rough. I had no appetite, vomiting, spitting, extremely weak and
Hmm.
sensitive to every scent. It was at
Hmm.
my weakest point in my life when I needed him the most. My husband started to show signs of major narcissism.
And how did you know that he was showing signs of major narcissism at this time? Was it during this time or after this time you recognized that it was major narcissism?
Well, I can say major narcissism at right now,
But
but
before
I
you
could
didn't know.
no, I didn't know about
Okay.
narcissism at
Hmm.
that time. I never even
Hmm.
knew the word, right?
Hmm.
But let me
So,
tell you what happened.
mhm. Okay.
He started to come home late from work.
Hmm.
He used to come home before the sun went down. Now he's coming home 7 o'clock. 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 9 o'clock, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, times like that. You know, he hardly ever called or messaged me until he stopped altogether. Remember, I'm on bed rest. He's not calling, not messaging. But when he was at home, he couldn't put down his phone. He started to come home from work, bathe, get dressed, and leave. Right? I had a 14-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl at home. I remember my 14-year-old son, Charlene, had to give me a cup of tea with crackers for dinner many times. Yeah, because he didn't come home to cook anything for us to eat. I couldn't help myself. I was that sick. I was very sick, very sick. The housework was piling up and he wasn't talking to me. I remember him telling me one day while I was laying on the bed that I was a burden to him, and it crushed me when he said that. It cut me to the core.
He told you that you were a burden to him.
Yes.
Wow.
He did. And I was pregnant with his child, you know, I'm his wife. You know, things only got worse. I found out at this point, while being pregnant on bed rest, can't help myself, hurting, that he was having an affair with a 19-year-old intern at work from messages I found on his phone. Now, when I found out, Charlene, he had absolutely no remorse. He showed no remorse, no shame, nothing. He was so cold. He just said, stepping out, and left me broken to pieces on bed rest. We didn't even have a fight. He just replaced me overnight, just like that. I mean, that experience almost sent me into premature labor because I started having mild contractions. Well, prayers work, you know, Charlene. Glory to God.
Yes.
Yeah. He showed no sign of concern. He came home and went to bed just like that. You know, I remember on Christmas Day, he told me he was leaving me. Actually, he said divorcing me for his girlfriend by January 2.
So this, hold on, Stephanie. So this new 19-year-old now, he is now calling his girlfriend. He's telling you that he's divorcing you for this girlfriend.
Yeah, he also told me that he made her his wife. You know, she had access to everything. I mean,
oh wow.
Yeah. But remember, I was in depression. I was a broken wife. I'll get to that point where I tell you everything.
Right.
By January 2, I had my beautiful baby boy, praise the Lord. So 1 week after he broke that devastating news to me, I had baby. You know, he was the one with the income, so he controlled everything. He stopped spending on me and the kids like he used to. He bought what he wanted and I had no say in anything. You know, he did what he wanted, and if I said anything, it was a major problem. As I said earlier, he was coming home 1, 2, 3 in the morning until he started to sleep out, and I wasn't to say anything about it. And when I did it, he wouldn't respond. Now that used to kill me because I didn't understand silent treatment at the time. You know, he would just sit there and look at me intently, and he would not respond to anything I had to say. You know, that became his lifestyle from that point on. He had no respect for me or his children living that kind of way. He would manipulate me to have his way and use that as a means of control. He left me all alone to care for my newborn without any support. I could hardly manage because I was still in so much physical pain and I had gotten stitches from giving birth. Charlene, I cried every single day for 2 years. It was very terrible.
2 years.
For 2 years straight, every day I cried. The man who I thought was my friend just became a monster. You know, he lied about everything.
Your eyes.
Right before my eyes, this person.
And your children's eyes as well.
Right. He changed completely. I didn't know this man anymore. He changed completely. He lied about everything now, even when he never had to. He made promises but never kept them. If the kids or myself said anything to him, he accused us of always complaining and that we were ungrateful. He said I didn't appreciate him and that I was an awful wife. He started sleeping out. If I tried to talk to him, he wouldn't respond. He looked at me with such disgust in his, you know, in his eyes and spoke to me like I was a pain to deal with. That killed me inside. That was it. I literally started to break all the way down because of how he treated me, and I had no self-worth or self-esteem left. He made me feel like the dirt under his feet. I guess me not being able to supply his needs turned him away from me.
And this
Whatever it
need
is.
that you're talking about is a sexual need that you're referring to.
Well, everything, because I was such a major support in his life. I held home down. I did everything, I've always been this major support in his life from day one, right?
And this is happening in this new island, not in Jamaica. This new island where you have no friends, no family, just him and the kids.
Right. So that's why it was so harsh for me. It was rough, tough. Everything was different, So I took it very hard. I went into severe depression, and I began to feel afraid because he completely changed and he threatened me at one point. Shame was killing me because he was publicly humiliating me with his adulterous relationship, even on social media. He had no shame or remorse. I just couldn't understand. He had no remorse. If he was going to say sorry, it was just sorry, and that was it. Just ice cold. I stayed away from people, and I locked up in my apartment because my life was overwhelming, and I didn't know how to deal with it publicly, Charlene. I shut down. I completely shut down. If I did go out in public with him, people would greet him, but not me. And I used to wonder, what is it that they know that I don't? And he never acknowledged me to them either. That was so embarrassing. I couldn't handle it. But during this time as well, God had his people, his servants, interceding for me because my situation was so horrific. And spiritually, I was dying inside.
And even though you were going through all of that, you could recognize that you were dying inside, and you needed some sort of spiritual intervention to find you. To find you.
Yes.
How did all this affect the children, though, Stephanie?
That's such a good question, Charlene. My children suffered, and it broke whatever heart I had left. Let me tell you, my son withdrew and locked away himself in his room when he was at home. His father basically abandoned him. He never took the time to build a relationship with him, even to this day. His grades at school suffered too, and I took that really hard because their education is paramount to me. I'm that kind of mom. My children excel at school, so to see his grades falling really shook me. My daughter needed her daddy, but he abandoned her too. I remember one night she said, "Daddy, don't go." And while she kept saying it in such a broken voice, remember she's 5 years old, he lifted his voice and said, "Don't bother with it." I mean, when I heard him say that to the little girl, my heart sank. I can't imagine what my daughter must have felt in that moment. My daughter started to lose weight. A matter of fact, me and the kids started to lose weight, but ironically, he was gaining weight. Yep.
Really?
Yeah, he didn't even look at the baby sometimes.
Wow. But Stephanie, listeners, Stephanie is still married to this man. Stephanie, why didn't you leave?
I was fearful for my life and for my children. We were in a foreign country on his work permit. No savings in the bank because he didn't save. And I had no job because he didn't give me the money to get my own work permit. I was in severe depression and sick in my body from all the trauma I had been dealing with for years. Charlene, shame was killing me. I was ashamed. I had no friends or family to turn to. And apart from the few who were praying me through, nobody really knew what was going on with Stephanie. They all thought it was peaches and creams. I didn't know where to go or what to do. In my mind, that's how I was reasoning my insecurities. So I stayed in the relationship.
Now, listeners, we're going to take our final break at this point. I would really want Stephanie to share with us when we return how she coped, because after going through all this trauma and still being this strong to stay in the relationship, there must be something that she holds on to that keeps her, that motivates her, and that remind her that she too has the strength to overcome anything. Was narcissistic abuse affected you?
Narcissistic abuse has psychologically affected me. It made me an emotional wreck, Charlene. If I had this conversation like 2 years ago, I wouldn't sound the way I sound today. I definitely wouldn't look the way I look today. It changed my life. My husband's rejection, emotional abuse, and adultery, it catapulted me into a deep pit of depression, self-sabotage, and heartbreak. It affected my relationships, especially with my children. I wasn't able to care for them the way I wanted to because I was always locked away crying my heart out. I stopped taking care of myself. I was always exhausted and drained. I had no support at home. My problems bombarded my mind and were the only things I seemed to talk about all the time. I literally started to lose my mind because no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to reach out to my husband, all efforts were futile. It was frustrating, and he had a set mind and didn't seem to care about anything I had to say or about our family. I lowered my standards to help him raise his, and it cost me dearly because when he finally got what he wanted, he rejected me for his new supply and his friends.
How did you cope, Stephanie? How did you cope, and what were some of the things you did to recover from this narcissistic abuse?
Well, it was about in late 2018, I really started to pray and cry out to God to help me. I went on 40 days prayer and fasting. And after that, my first time ever, 40 days prayer and fasting. And after that, a series of events started to happen in my life, which led me to a ministry page I follow on social media.
Right.
I kept seeing the word narcissist, but ignored it every time. I started to wonder if it was a word gone viral because I kept seeing this word. It just looked like a weird word. So I didn't pay any attention.
Right.
Yeah. Until one day a post on Facebook got my attention. Finally, I believe God got my attention. For the first time, I learned about the narcissist, and I was blown. My mind was blown. I was shocked. Everything I had been suffering from, this person was writing about as if she knew my business.
Wow.
It was so deep. And what surprised me more were the hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are in some way affected by narcissistic abuse from their partners or family members, even employers. I've read testimonies of this behavior even happening in the church. Right. I started to study narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. I understood that narcissistic abusers feed off your need for them or reactions. They seem to get a kick out of ripping your emotions to pieces.
So they have to lower your emotions for them to feel good about themselves, because that is what they feed on.
Yes. I had to learn to go gray rock, which simply means being completely emotionless when communicating with my husband, and minimize having contact, which wasn't hard for me because he was hardly ever home anyway. But that didn't mean I wasn't dying inside, right? I know the listeners may be wondering what I did to overcome this madness. Well,
yes, there must be a method to the madness, to your madness. Tell us the method, Stephanie.
All right. God started to deal with me. You see, I didn't get to where I was only because of my husband. I played a part in this as well. Can I talk the truth?
Yes, please.
We were both young. We were both young and broken. And now I understood this. But the time came when we were grown folks, and grown folks should have some level of good sense. Anything not built on a good foundation will
Right.
falter. Many of the decisions I made were from brokenness and were emotional because I was an emotional wreck all my life, basically. Despite the narcissistic abuse, my husband never once hit me. Praise
Right.
God. And he still supported the house financially, even though he took advantage of us. Things could have gotten real ugly real quick many times, but I thank God it didn't,
Right.
right? I couldn't live the way I was living anymore. I couldn't bear up under the pressure anymore. I started to desire change and prayed for God to help me to get out. The
Right.
Lord started to give me strategies, step by step, how to put away my foolish ways and stop the pity party. Enough is enough. I had had enough, and apparently God was too. I had to forgive myself and my husband. This was a pivotal point on my journey. This made it much easier for me to heal. I got to the place where I could now pray earnestly for my husband because I made the choice to forgive him and worked at it daily. But it didn't happen overnight. It was a process.
Process.
Right. I shared how I did this on my blog.
Okay.
I started to journal and get it out. There was so much trauma in me. I would write out and voice record my dreams, which works
Oh.
better for me because God speaks to us in our dreams too. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn to love myself again and practice self-care. Can I tell you? One day, I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't like
What
the
you were
woman
saying.
looking, right? I didn't like the woman looking back at me.
Right.
And I heard the voice of the Lord say to me, you will have to love yourself the way you are to become the woman you desire to be.
Powerful.
And listen, there's a song that says his voice makes the difference. And I'm telling you, when he speaks, he relieves our troubled mind. From that time forth, it's as if his words came with power because change started to take place in my heart. I started to love me again. I started to wear makeup. I started to put effort into life. I wanted to live because I felt like I wanted to die. Right? I started to aggressively affirm myself with the word of God. I used to write scriptures out and post it and put them behind my door. Many times throughout the course of the day, I would run to the back of my door. I built an altar right behind my bedroom door. I had to learn to shut my mouth. Hold on. Let me hit that one more time. I had to learn to shut my mouth and walk away because he would say and do things to draw me out.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, tell our listeners what we mean when we say draw out in Jamaican term. It's not pen and paper, you know, it's just to get you to argue with him.
Right. You know, and to step out of character for him to say you're crazy or that's why I don't want to stay or that's why I do the things I do. And avoid arguments at all costs. Listen, that was hard for me, but eventually I got better at it. Glory to God. Because, and another thing too, being a part of a church body also helped me tremendously. It allowed me to get out of the house, you know, and breeze my mind and to just worship with the brethren. I mean, one big thing for me was setting boundaries. Listen, I could preach on that one because I had no boundaries. He was just used to walking all over me and getting his way. But when I started to set boundaries, I became the villain and he started to play the victim. Can you believe it? But I didn't watch that because I had a made up mind about changing my life. I also made the decision to leave the toxicity behind and move on with my children to a new and better life.
In the same home.
Right. In the same home.
Right. This is a lot. Many women today suffer from narcissistic abuse and are still suffering because of the trauma bonding between the victim and the abuser. You know, for example, you know, the abuser might be physical with you, like physically hit you, and then moments after he might return with a bouquet of flowers to make you feel as though, you know, he's sorry or, you know, and then because after a while your own cognitive dissonance is affected, that as a woman, you question your own ability to function and just questioning who you are as an individual. But studies have also shown that narcissism exists more in men when compared to with women. So studies are suggesting that most times it's the men who suffers from NPD disorders in comparison to women. So Stephanie, your story is very powerful. You have been narcissistically abused. Now what? What do you want to say to our listeners, especially to those persons who might be suffering in a narcissistic relationship?
Okay. Narcissists are pathological liars. They need the admiration of others. In their eyes, it's all about them. They manipulate and control to have their way. Some are verbally and physically abusive. Yet to the outside world, they are the kindest, most helpful, sweetest person. But to their victims, they're a monster. My husband seemed to have taken pleasure in sabotaging me. Forget about an apology. They show no remorse for their wicked ways. You know you're not safe around them. Now I'm talking to the listeners, those who can relate to what I've been talking about. You know you're not safe around them, and you know they will continue to hurt you, but you can't bring yourself to leave. You're caught up in this toxic love-hate cycle called trauma bonding. Narcissists don't feel the effects of trauma bonds, only those being abused. The narcissist will never be there for you. They simply can't be bothered. The love and affection you desire from a relationship, you won't find that with a narcissist. Leaving a narcissistic relationship is never going to follow the traditional or average recovery time for a breakup or separation, because recovery from psychological abuse involves completely rebuilding your self-esteem, restoring normal adrenaline levels, and finding inner strength you've never had before. All that stuff takes time. It comes down to choice. If you choose to stay, there will come a point in your life when you will regret it with every cell in your body. Choosing to leave a narcissist isn't a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of survival. There's a song by Bob Marley that says, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds." Things change when people change. Had it not been for my relationship with Jesus Christ, I wouldn't be here today, because I got suicidal twice in this toxic relationship, and my spouse didn't even seem to care. So I leave the scripture with the listeners. It's Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." What a mighty God we serve.
Yes,
God bless you.
Yes, indeed he is. Stephanie, a powerful story. I'm lost for words. I know our listeners out there, those who can relate, who might relate to what you have just shared with us, who might be going through similar situation. I hope your story would have motivated them and lifted their spirit. And I hope that you would have inspired many persons who thought their days are just coming to an end, because it's never easy to be in an abusive relationship. Wrap up for our listeners, how, to go through this whole situation and come out being the victor.
Well, the privilege telling my story, Charlene, was truly mine here. I thank you so much. This is actually my first time telling my story on radio, and I pray that it has impacted the listeners in an insightful way. It's my heart and my passion to help, because I know what the pain felt like. It was real to me. I know what that brokenness feels like. I know what crying 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the morning feels like. I know what it feels like. So even now, I intercede for people who I don't even know, but I know that there are people out there going through hell. And I just lift them up in prayer all the time, because I know I'm called in ministry to minister to these kinds of people, So I just pray, and I have been praying that my story will impact lives, and people will get the help, hope, and healing that they're searching for, because there is hope and there is healing. So God bless you, Charlene. Thank you again for having me, and God bless the listeners.
Right. Finally, listeners, abuse is never okay. And if you're listening and can identify with what Stephanie is saying or Stephanie has just said, please seek help.